Well, welcome back to the Engineered Life podcast powered by Kahua. This is a show that's focused on reshaping the future of construction without all the buzzwords. We instead like to have honest, human, and practical conversations about what's working, what's not, and what we're still trying to figure out. In each episode, I sit down with someone who has a unique superpower they're using to make the industry better. And when we talk about honest human conversations, I couldn't be more excited to be joined by Ian Gray, who is no stranger to construction technology, but also no stranger to the mental side of construction and what it means to have a strong mind or a healthy mind. In fact, he's one of the brains behind the new Salty and Wired podcast. Welcome, Ian.
Hey, AJ, thanks for having me, man.
You are welcome. If you are not familiar with Ian and the new podcast, what you need to know is his superpower is honest, real human conversations. Who would have
Yeah,
thought?
sometimes not to my advantage, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different industry today, and we need to accept that it's a different industry because in order for construction to truly move forward, we can't lose sight of the people that are behind the work.
Sure.
And so my question to kind of start things off for you, Ian, is first and foremost, was there a moment in your career where you kind of realized our hardest problems aren't necessarily the tech, but more importantly, the human element?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great question, AJ. Um, so I've had a couple of key moments in my career. The first one I want to explain real quick was when I was 5 years old. That was the first job site I ever walked on. It was in
Ooh,
Florida. Back in the day, back in the early 80s, my family could not afford an Atari 2600. And I know I'm aging myself there. So my first foray into construction, I walked onto a job site. There were no barricades or anything. We just walked on and jumped on the equipment, and a lot of unsafe things for 5 year olds, right? And I grabbed a 2x4 block and a piece of board, ran home, put a nail right in the block, drew a little red button in the corner. And for those that know the 2600, you know what I'm talking about. I drew a Pac-Man on the board, and I pretended to play it until we could afford a 2600. The reason why I'm telling you that is because, my entire career, my entire life, I've basically been focused on building something out of nothing. That's what construction is, right? You look at an empty plot of land, and lo and behold, there's a structure that ends up there.
right.
And I spent about a decade selling construction tech, all sorts of technology that was supposed to fix everything. And spoiler alert, it doesn't, right? Um, so, to your question, when did I realize that a lot of the hardest problems weren't technical? Um, when I was in construction, not as a 5 year old, but as a grown adult, there were times when I would wake up in the middle of the night, or not even wake up, but I would get to work the next morning, and I would come into emails that I sent myself at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I didn't even remember sending these. They're complete gibberish. No recollection of sending them at all. Um, I thought that I was strange, right? And maybe I am, but I was telling some people this, and this one dude said, "Hey, that happens to me all the time."
Yeah,
I'm like, "What?" And then I talked to someone else, and I'm like, "Yeah, I've done that before." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" So I started realizing that, you know, maybe there's something going on here in the industry, and I don't think that the human stuff is not hard, right? It's just we're not taking the time to do it. Right. And so, a breath is 8 seconds. Eye contact is free. The barrier is it's not the skills that we have, it's having the space and the permission to do it. So the hard things in construction they're not the hard things. It's just that they're the ones that we're not allowing ourselves to do. And so, it took me, having those 2 a.m. emails, when it got personal for me, I had no problem addressing this. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 48 years old.
yeah,
And I had been trying to perform in industries or sections of the industry that just weren't built for my brain, and roles that weren't built for my brain. And in our podcast, we've had guests on that the same thing, right? 40-year veteran in the field breaking down in his truck after leaving a job site. Um, everybody has these. You don't have to go far in the industry to realize that the challenges, the hard parts, they're not technical. They're all about the people. And then when we peel back the layers a little bit more, we realize that those hard parts, they're not hard. It's just we're not allowing ourselves to focus on them.
That's a really good point, and it makes the mental health side of the industry, it pulls it away from the abstract and makes it more personal, right? As you
Mhm.
start to realize that you're not the only one. By the way, I have ADHD myself, but I was diagnosed in school. So kind of peeling that back a little bit deeper, then when you figured this out, right, and started identifying you weren't the only one, did that change how you showed up in the industry?
No.
No.
No, I was afraid to share it,
Ah,
I'm not I'm not the quintessential macho man, but you know what? We all have ego. A few of us are afraid to address it, but I got to a point where I couldn't pretend anymore. Someone asked me once, "Where'd you get the courage to speak up?" I'm like, It's not courage, man. I just got exhausted and tired of pretending." And it was that threshold, right, where I started leaning into some of my personal challenges, and trying to, orchestrate my day around the way my brain is wired. And I started seeing that, hey, this isn't a bad thing. This is, some people call it a superpower. I don't know if I agree with that, but there's a sense of liberation and a freeing sense when you realize, hey, there's nothing wrong with us, whether we're struggling with ADHD or something else. But let's just tweak the way that we're operating so that we can lean into it. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
so that,
So
yeah.
interesting because I'm one of those guys that I do believe it's a superpower. I believe
Mhm.
it is an incredible skill to be willing to be vulnerable. But on top of that, I also believe it's courageous. And courage, right, is defined as being afraid but doing it anyway, right?
Mhm.
And in that point of where you kind of hit exhaustion and you just said enough is enough, but that's your story. As you've had more and more conversations over the last few years and have kind of been known for having these honest conversations, where do you see others still get uncomfortable when these topics come up, whether they be leaders or just individuals?
Um, hmm. I think when we start talking about the difficult conversations, I mean, we all know this industry is very litigious. I think we hear liability. You know, people when let's use mental health. I mean, man, the term mental health is thrown around all year long. Some months more than others, obviously. But when people hear that, they hear weakness, they hear HR, they hear liability. What they're not hearing though, AJ, is they're not hearing, hey, your best super is about to quit and you have no reason you don't have any idea why.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
people they don't hear that, they don't feel that, and so I think that's where we could probably do something, as companies, as individuals. We'll do a toolbox talk. We'll put up posters. God, these posters, man. um, but asking a guy or asking a girl, like, "Hey, you good? Like, where's your tank today? Where are you? Like, how you feeling?" And actually making eye contact with that person and waiting for a real answer, and not like, "Yeah, yeah, everything's good," but like sitting down and giving space for a real answer. That's where everybody's freezing, I think. And it's not easy to do that, but it should be because we're all human.
Right. And to kind of to pull on that just a little bit more, right? You mentioned the super that could be quitting and nobody
Mhm.
understands why. Or even the executive that's walking away and nobody really knows why. What what do you see happening on teams when no one is truly willing to admit what's going on, and they just keep sweeping it under the rug?
Well, I mean, that's it. They just keep sweeping under the rug, and I mean, it's a gamble, right? And I mean, obviously, you and I, we kind of run in the same circles, circle slash echo chamber.
Right.
But there are a lot of people that we both know that are friends of both of ours, where they've been on teams where things seem fine, and the cracks in the foundation, we just build on them, right? And nothing happens. We get lucky, or they get lucky. But we all know people whose teams weren't lucky, um, and they tried to keep moving on. They didn't address things, or maybe too little, too late, and worst case scenario happens, right? Death by suicide, or addiction, things like that. So I mean, it's not always just somebody looking for greener pastures, right? Like this has real impact and real consequence, for real individuals, real people.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, much like you, I've been in those situations myself, and at some point you just have to step away. And I vividly remember the conversation with my wife where she's like, "I want my husband back."
Hmm.
And it wasn't that I was traveling too much; it was that mentally, in the mental space, you just aren't there anymore. So that kind of brings me to the next question. Like, we're here and we're willing to admit this, but where do you see the industry still pushing back against these conversations? Like, no, that's not really us, or back to your tough guy mentality.
Hmm.
Oh, we're too good for that.
AJ, if you would have asked me this question, literally, I mean, because when we were preparing for this show, I told you I'm kind of in like a weird mental pivot right now. If you would have asked me this same question 2 months ago, or even a month ago, I would have answered completely different than I will today. But I've been talking to a lot of people, in Rob's and my podcast. We've been talking to a lot of people. Um, my opinion on this has shifted greatly. So where am I seeing that the industry is still pushing back? We we keep talking about the construction industry like it's just one thing, and it's just
Hmm.
not. Construction it's an intersection of a bunch of different businesses, right? A bunch of different
Right.
industries, and they're literally crashing into each other. Okay. The architect, the GC, the subs, the owners, the consultants, the CM, the suppliers, vendors, the tech companies.
Right.
We're all colliding on a plot of land or on a project. The result is a structure gets built, and then when it's done, everybody's scrambling to pick up the pieces just to do it all over again. So like, here's how I would frame it. We talk about construction being the industry, like it's construction. Let's fix construction. Every
Yeah.
tech company wants to fix construction. What does that even
Yep.
mean? Okay, so who's the CEO of construction? Right? There's no CEO of
Yep.
construction. Everyone in tech, consultants, government, everyone's trying to solve for construction. There's no industry where they're like sitting in a room deciding to care about mental health. And, so when we collectively say the industry has a suicide problem, it's not landing because it's too big, it's too abstract. And what it's doing, it's letting everyone off the hook.
Right.
So the past few weeks I've been thinking, let's stop thinking about the construction industry and bring it down to where it's real, right? Let's start thinking about our companies, our teams, our crews, our individuals, ourselves, right? Not the industry at whole or at large, right? Um, so you have a crew of like 7 people, maybe, and statistically speaking, one of them or more are dealing with a mental health challenge. Okay. One one member of your team or your company may be contemplating suicide right now as we speak, right? That's forget the industry stats, right? That's Bob. That's Maria. That's the guy that showed up 3 days in a row late for work, and we write him up instead of asking if he's okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's the reframe, I think. And I think that, we're saying a lot of the right things at the conferences, and we're putting it in the slide decks and on the posters and things like that. And you know what, the job's still gonna go over budget. It's gonna, bust the schedule. And all of a sudden nobody really cares about love and respect, right? In our podcast, we were talking about love and respect. Yeah, that sounds great when things are good, but what construction project are things going great, right? So it's out the window. So, you know, I don't know. I think that the reframe happens with not positioning it as the industry has a problem, but like our companies, our teams have a problem. And then, of course, there's the question of responsibility, right? And I don't have the answer to this, but who's responsible for this? Is it the company's job to be responsible for its employees' mental health? And to what extent are they responsible? Is a poster and an 800 number and a toolbox talk once a year, is that sufficient?
Right.
Um, do people even call the numbers? Like, I don't know. Um, but, I think maybe the answer isn't more programs, more posters, more apps, more EAPs, more awareness. Maybe it's a lot simpler than that. And, maybe it's giving space and flexibility, right? A
Yeah.
culture where, I'm thinking a culture where a guy can just say, "Hey, man, I need 10 minutes," and nobody questions it. They just let him go. You don't need a wellness program for that. You just need a foreman who's not going to flinch when someone shows up and tells him or her, "Hey, I'm not okay today."
So if we do that, if we shrink it down, and let's say we're not looking at the industry as a whole, but we're going to look at our company, or we're even going to look at our project, right? Are there things that you routinely hear leaders say regarding mental health, but still see them struggling to act on?
Yeah, I think everybody's struggling to act on all of it. You know, I, the 1-800, the posters, I'm knocking. I'm like, they're important, but people don't know what to do. If
Mm-hmm.
someone came to me 5 years ago and said, "Hey, man, I'm not okay," I wouldn't know what to do. I would refer them to HR, and chances are they wouldn't know what to do. Right. And so, I think as mental health advocates, and we all know a lot of good ones out there, if we're starting to teach people not how to deal with or handle someone with a mental health challenge, but to give them space, give them time to go off and do that, a quick breath work session, a quick 5-minute breath work session, that does wonders. Right. Um, Providing access to resources, and not just access but time to actually use them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But
So,
I think, oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, like, a lot of this comes back to like treating people like people, right? Like
Hmm.
treating them as humans. Um, but also like enabling your teams to know what to do and what to handle, because so often, right, it comes down to even the words that we use, because our our um our estimates and even our schedules look at resourcing,
Hmm.
right? They're not people, they're resources, or assets. Our people are our greatest assets, right? Phraseology like that. Are those, do those words make us feel like, oh, they're just interchangeable? Like we lose one person, we can swap them out with another? Or is there, is there something more behind that where we've got to get back to treating them as true human beings?
I mean, my opinion, but
Yeah.
let me answer the question with a question. Are they replaceable?
I, it's a great question. In my opinion, I would say their skills are replaceable, but they as a human are not. Like
Yeah.
they as a person are not. Is that a difference though?
I think you're going to find that for some companies, in some projects, um, people are replaceable, and they're going to be treated as such. And when you're right, the phraseology, it matters, right? If you're calling somebody an asset or a resource, I mean, and someone's like resource loaded into a Gantt chart, and they feel, and listen, AJ, you and I have both felt like resources in our
Hmm.
careers, right? We're not any different. Um, but when you treat your people like a resource, you can't be surprised that they're acting and responding as a resource too. You know what I mean? And you know what? I hate the fact that this is going to go into a little AI tangent, but I'm a little concerned about the AI boom and the data center boom as well, because you're you're dealing with a lot of compressed schedules. I'm starting to see a lot of data centers working the triple shift, 24/7 to make sure that these things are up and running, like never before. There's a skilled labor shortage. I think we're going to start really using people even more so as replaceable resources to hit milestones and timelines.
Right.
I think that I think it's a something that we need to be aware of. And it goes back to like, well, who's responsible for the well being of these resources? Is it the owner? Is it one of these big companies that's building these data centers? Should they take a stake in this? And there's argument from just being decent human beings that they should, but also from a business perspective, it might benefit them.
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think with things going the way that they are, things aren't going to get easier. It's going to get more challenging. That's why it's important to have this conversation now and to put some sort of guardrails and some sort of system in place so that we're not burning out our best quote unquote resource, being our people.
Well, let's dig into that just a little bit more, right? Because like you feel it's so important to have this conversation right now that you went out and started a podcast, right? We talked about that
Mhm.
kind of up at the front. You and Rob have a new podcast. As this conversation continues to evolve and we have this important conversation right now, what gives you hope as you look at the next generation that's entering the industry?
What gives me hope? Um, what gives me hope is the fact that, I mean, I'm a student of human nature, and I think when humans are pressed to certain breaking points, that's when certain elements of the human spirit shines, and I think we're about to hit that. I am hearing, I mean, obviously more and more people are starting to talk about this, and we're seeing more companies that are taking care of their teams. Um, so I'm hopeful that the future kind of swings back into caring for the people, because there's, once again, being a decent human being above all else, but there's a real tangible business impact when you treat your quote unquote resources as actual human beings. You'll get a better product out of that for sure. So I'm hopeful for that. I Where my hope starts to dwindle, um, there's a knowledge cliff coming. Right, we all know that. I also call it a wisdom cliff. Someone told me that the other day, and I stole it. Because not you could look up on Chat GPT or any of the AI flavors of the month and get some knowledge, but
Hmm.
there's no wisdom there, right? At
Right.
least not yet. And there's a wisdom cliff that's coming, that we're all kind of talking about, but nobody really knows what to do about it. Um, and I don't know what to. I don't have an answer to that. I'm not going to pretend to. There's the whole AI replacing workers thing. I don't think they're going to be replacing workers. I think that they're going to, I mean, you can be destroyed by AI and not be replaced, right? I think AI is going to eliminate the need for a lot of people, just for those roles. That uncertainty, I know for a fact, is starting to chip away at people's mental health, right? I mean,
Right.
think about me. I'm approaching 50, right? And I even worry about this stuff, but think about a 55-year-old superintendent watching his company just like pour all this money and this investment into technology that no one even really understands. I mean, how's he or she supposed to feel about that? That's tough. But yeah, I mean, the next generation, like, let's bring it back to the hope. Like, they're just not going to tolerate the stuff that we've tolerated.
Exactly.
They're just not going to. They'll just leave, and we're already seeing that. And that's what gives me hope is that the younger generation, their absence is forcing us to have this conversation, whether we like it or not.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's that old lie about, we're tougher than that. They're not gonna take that. They're not gonna pretend that they have to be tougher than that, right? Um, so let's get practical for a minute, right?
Yeah.
If I'm a superintendent, or even just an individual on a job site, and I'm listening to this right now,
Mhm.
what is one small way that I can work to create that space that allows honesty on a team or a crew or a job site?
Yeah. So two things. So from a leadership perspective, let's just imagine that you're a super on site or a foreman, foreperson on site. Go first. Got two words, go first. And what that means, you can't tell your crew, hey, it's safe to be honest. If you haven't been honest yourself, right? So share one thing with your crew, something real. And you don't need a TED talk or anything like that. And you don't need a breakdown it doesn't have to be anything like that, but just like a simple, hey guys, I had a rough week. And then when you go first, come back and tell me, watch what happens when when the boss says that out loud. You know what I mean? And then,
Is
oh yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any tips to make that like not feel awkward or forced? Like I could see that vulnerability is key, but if you approach it in the wrong way, it's just going to come across as oversharing, right? Like, is there any trick to being real?
No, there's never going to be a trick to being real. You just got to be real.
Exactly.
We had a guest I think last week, and he was telling a story about um, how he got introduced to the industry, and he used to go to his dad was a mechanical contractor out of New York City, and this guy used to go to his dad's sites, right? And he would sit down with the crew. He would run across the street to a bodega, get lunch for the crew that his dad would buy for everybody. And they would just sit on their boxes or the coolers or whatever. And they would just have this like proverbial campfire and they would just be open and real, like, hey, this is where we messed up or this is what I'm going through. Um, and, from his perspective, we've lost a lot of that. So I think there's no
Mhm.
trick or tip. Just be a human being, but go first. You know what I mean?
I like that a lot. Just sitting around the table, like we all get lost in our phones. Like put the phone
Hmm.
down, right? Have that conversation. Speaking of like putting the phone down, are there any like human first habits that you've seen that have actually changed a culture on a project? Like just a little thing that makes you focus back on the human being aspect of it?
And every day it's harder and harder to put our phones down. Especially, I mean, you and I both work in tech, so there's a need for the phones, right? We've kind of
Mhm.
that ship has sailed. Um, I like this is kind of like a little tip or trick, because it's lessened the reliance on that. But putting your phone in grayscale, it helps.
Ooh.
Because what that's going to do is it triggers dopamine, all that kind of science. We can get into that another day, but what it does is it lessens your desire to be on your phone, right? So if you're accessing your project management app and it's all black and white, um, you're not going to want to spend as much time there. You're going to want to get the information in and then get out and spend more time with your crew, right? The other thing that I would say, and this is by no means an original. I learned this from my brother in wellness, as he says, Rob McKinney, and the team over at My Steady Mind. And this is bringing it back to the individual is what they call a BAMO breath, BAMO, just BAMO. This is probably the most underrated tool that the industry needs right now, and it's 100% invisible. So You don't have to worry about somebody looking over and being like, what's AJ doing over there? Um, but this brings you back to being a human, right? It brings you back into your body. It does all sorts of great things for your brain and like how your focus and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it brings you back into being a person. And all it is BAMO stands for breathe and move on. So you take 4 seconds breath in through your nose and then 4 seconds out through your mouth. And that's it, man. It takes 8 seconds. Do it twice. It takes 16 seconds. Right. And what this does is it helps you to focus. It helps you to get back to, I mean, you know, the Stoics, right? But 2000 years ago or 3000 years ago, they were saying it's not what happens to you, but how you react. Like this BAMO breath
Right.
is going to help you react in a calm, strong manner to the crap that's happening on a job site. So it's going to bring your strength, your human strength, back to the forefront on a project.
Yeah. And I love that. 3 real practical things: putting the phone down, going to grayscale, and taking that BAMO breath that folks can utilize. You can do that today
Mhm.
and make some positive change.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
Ian, I tell
to
you, I can't thank you enough for your honesty today, man.
Yeah, of course. I'm just sharing what I've learned. But can I make a quick correction?
Yeah.
You mentioned three things, and you said put your phone down. The first thing is for a leader to go first.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the
Create the
4th one. You're right. Yep.
Yeah.
I,
So
and
those are the things that I would recommend. I've seen teams do all these things, and they seem so minor. Do not accept the fact that they seem minor and you know, convolute that with or conflate that with effectiveness. Okay. Sometimes the
right.
most impactful things are the easiest things to do.
Yeah. Small things, big, big impact.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, this is an incredibly deep topic. So I appreciate you going there, right? Going first and responding in the way that you have. Um, if this conversation resonated with you today, take one of those 4 things and go give it a try, see what happens. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode or know someone who maybe could use some of this, let them know. Share the episode, rate the show, give us your feedback. Um, let others know how they can help shape the future of construction, because construction is cool. So we want to tell our friends. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Thank you.